Hi everyone, Sajid Amit here, and welcome to my review of the Eminent Ears Ruby, which is a recent launch from a newish brand called Eminent Ears. But just because it's new, you should not scoff at it, because this was, in case you did not know, the talk of CanJam Singapore 2024. And people were crazy about this. People just went ballistic when they heard the bass on this, and people wanted it. And I don't think this is being produced in significant quantities because it is a small boutique brand from Hong Kong. And from what I understand, this has been inundated with a lot of requests and orders. And so in CanJam Singapore, you had the water cooler guys, right? Water cooler is a thread on HeadFi you might have heard of already, because I do talk about it in reviews and stuff, and you should check it out, because although it's mostly people who indulge and buy really high-end Summit-Fi products, these guys often know what they're talking about, so it does make for very intelligent conversations. It's a very good platform for good discussions, intellectual exchanges, and the discussions do get cerebral, which I really appreciate, and more than just looking at a curve or a target graph. So this was very sought after and very liked and appreciated with the water cooler guys. This was liked by other very people whose reviews and tastes and opinions I've begun to trust, such as Pulkit, who's a reviewer based out of India. And so this is something that I was very excited to review, and I still am. So this is called Eminent Ears, as it's pretty evident that the packaging does look like it's a luxury product, which is awesome. The lettering, the coloring, the finish of the sort of typeface and the packaging is impressive. And then, of course, I will reveal what you get inside this box. I also like the logo. I think it's quite nifty. And voila, you get a cleaning cloth. And then, of course, you get the IMs. So it is a beautiful shade of red, which they call fiery red on their website. And yeah, it's very nice. And you get, of course, this carrying pouch, which will reveal a cable. So let's just talk about the IMs, guys. And of course, you get a bunch of paperwork and this plastic bag, which I think had something that I have probably put elsewhere. So yeah, so it has a bunch of stuff that you get with other IMs as well. So this is a very nice looking IM, guys. The red is a very nice radiant shade of red. It's got this beautiful texture of it's sort of like flakes, like a finish. And of course the logo here of Eminent Ears, and then Ruby is written here. It's somewhat bulbous, but then it does have a bunch of drivers. So this has a 10 dynamic driver, which is responsible for handling the lower frequencies. This new generation 10 dynamic driver is something that I think a lot of people are crediting for this insane amount of bass. So in terms of his driver spec, guys, this is one dynamic driver for low frequencies, 4 BAs for mid-range, so 2 for mid-range and 2 for higher frequencies, and then he's got 4 ESC drivers for ultra high frequencies. So he's got a total of 9 drivers. The impedance is 60 ohms, sensitivity is 103 decibels. The plug terminates in 4.4 mm. And it does take 2-pin connectors, as might be evident. I mean, most IMs do, with the exception of IMs like Campfire. And then it's got the cable is a silver-plated copper alloy with the cross braiding design. The cable is what it is. It's a collaboration with another brand that I think has begun to get a lot of respect in the hobby. And it's flash acoustics, if I'm not mistaken. But it's especially made for Eminent Ears, so you see the logo even on the chin splitter. And overall, it's a decent cable. It's not a terrible cable. I would, of course, swap it out with a better quality cable, and I have managed to get slightly better sound with a better quality cable. I would recommend Astral Acoustics for this, and I have tried this with Astral Acoustics. Their copper and silver cables both sound amazing. So that's that. Now to move on to a discussion of what these IMs sound like. So this has resin construction, and this is on the larger side, but it's deceivingly lightweight. The comfort is good, but it's not extraordinary because of the size. The bass is the star of the show, and that's why you buy this. This is somewhat Harman tuned, but I do find the bass to be a little more tactile than I find in a lot of other Hi-Fi IMs. This, of course, is more expensive than most hi-fi IM. This $2,300. It's no by no means, one of those Moondrop level stuff. The sub bass is very, very prominent. It's stumpy, it's rumbly, and although I have friends who lament the relative focus on sub bass because a lot of my friends like a combination of mid bass and sub bass. If you are one of those who finds mid bass to be something that just dirties up the sound and muddies up the sound and unnecessarily thickens up the sound, this will be a relief for you, because what the sub bass focus does is it offers cleanliness and it doesn't intrude or get into the sort of mid-range territory of the frequency response. So if you like that sort of stuff, this will be a dream IM for you. Mid-range is great. It's colored decently in the fact that it's got pinna gain, and I do find pinna gain to add coloration in that it does accentuate. I mean, it's not just pinna gain. I think we all want some level of pinna gain, but this has a reasonable amount of pinna gain. I haven't seen a graph for this, but this I would suggest is perhaps up there with other Harman-tuned IMs with this pinna gain, which does make for a certain kind of intimacy of presentation. So you get a lot of resolution in the mid-range because of the energy in the upper mids. Like you hear lips parting, you hear vocalists breathing, you hear nuances and textures in a singer's voice. If you like mid-range and you like a lot of sub-bass, again, I feel like this could be something you could just retire from the hobby with. That said, because of the pinna gain focus, I do suspect that, and I do find that female vocals do sound better for my ears than I think male vocals can. Not to suggest that male vocals sound bad. Male vocals do not sound bad by any means. Male vocals sound wonderful. They sound intimate. They sound clear. However, like I said, I do think it does, bring out female vocals slightly more. And then, of course, I think the treble is not very pronounced. So let's say, for example, despite having these, extraordinary number of drivers and well, it's not extraordinary because a lot of IMs do have a high driver count. The upper treble for me is somewhat polite. It's not non-existent. So it's not like you won't make out frequencies and you won't make out, sounds that are supposed to be there, like cymbals, for example, are on 10 kilohertz. And other sounds that essentially, relate or correlate to air frequencies. So it's not like you won't get a sense of air around instruments, around images, because it does have a decent quantity of air. It's just not the star of the show by any means, which again might be something you like if you like the upper mids pronunciation, because when IMs have an upper mids pronunciation or a protrusion, and they have a sub bass protrusion, and they have a air frequency protrusion, what ends up happening is it does become somewhat overly W-shaped, and it does end up annoying a lot of you, is what I'm told. I'm someone who usually likes air frequencies more than average, and I'm someone who doesn't like pinna gain as much as the average listener does, is what I'm told. However, I do find that the average listener prefers pinna gain more than I think, air frequency. So in that sense, it does make for somewhat of a warmish treble. I wouldn't call it outright warm. And I do think the sound really depends on the tips you use, because certain tips do bring out the treble and pinna gain much more than other tips. And I do find that the sound depends a lot on the source you're driving it with. So let's say, for example, with my iBasso DX260, which is I find to be brighter than neutral, this does sound brighter. And with my Sony W1ZM2, which is my go-to tab for everything, it does warm up the sound. So overall, I would say it's a harmonious sound. And I do like it with the Pentacon Courier brass tips, which I think offers it some resoluteness in overall frequency. So it does. The Pentacon Courier brass tips have a way of making the sub bass very tight, which I like. It retains the clarity of the upper mids, and it does add a bit of spice to the upper treble. So overall, I find it to be slightly more balanced with those tips. So guys, in terms of technical performance, I know you'll expect a lot given its price point of $2,300. And I don't think it disappoints per se. However, I think that it's not... I think in terms of technicalities for its price, it's what I would say is that it's a very decent performer. So the sound stage stands out because it's fairly holographic and it does sound wide. It does bring you in and gives you a very cauldron-like effect. And even with, and I particularly like soundtrack music with this sort of IM. I love orchestra with this sort of IM, although I'm not usually into orchestra. Like I played even Metallica tracks, like the Metallica sort of collabs with classical musicians, and I think it's called Metallica S&M. So those have a very grandiose feel to the soundstage, and I do like the soundstage here quite a bit. Imaging is something that I found imaging is interesting here, because imaging here does vary depending on what source you drive it with. Like, it's not difficult to drive, I think, but I think the imaging of my Sony was just at a different level and one of the best I've ever heard. Just short of the Jewel and the Odin, I think. But overall, imaging here is just a touch short of, let's say, a $5,000 IM like the Romo Audio Jewel. But it does rival the Jewel for soundstage, which is saying a lot. Resolution-wise, again, I think it stops short of being a Jewel. It is not as technically resolving, or is resolving in terms of finer nuances in a song, finer, textures in a music, as might be the case with the $5,000 product like a Jewel. But it does hold its own against even competitors like that are more expensive, even in the $4,000 range, like the Fur Audio, XC6 and all those IMs. So for $2,500-ish, you do get a fair amount of technical performance. You get very good detail retrieval. You get awesome soundstage. You get very good imaging. And lastly, in terms of timbre, it sounds good. It sounds like a Harman tuned IM. I find that a lot of mid-bassy IMs, usually sound more organic in the lower mids. But however, it does sound extremely timbrally coherent. And honestly speaking, it's got very decent timbre. And dynamics is something that I think is often a product of the FR and the drivers used in other aspects of the circuitry. Dynamics here are very, very good because you do buy this for sub bass. The sub bass impact does make for a very dynamic and lively presentation. And I think if you like a warm IM with good dynamics, you have to look no further than this. Okay, so in conclusion, this is a stellar choice. This is an awesome choice. This is like one of the top choices out there for a bass head warm IM. It is a bass lover's delight. It is a bassy set. It's balanced, it's coherent, it's neutral. It's very neutral, as a matter of fact, to my ears. I mean, by neutral, I'm not talking about the kind of neutral that, worked for me, let's say, for heavy metal. Because for heavy metal, I do prefer less spin again. But it's neutral in the sense, you will enjoy it with a variety of genres. It can be your one and done IM. For all these reasons, I do recommend this strongly, guys. I will leave a link to where you can buy this from, and I do think you should try to audition before you buy. That's something I always advise, because how I hear this might be very different from how you hear this, because how I hear this is a function of my own unique anatomy, as well as my choice of cables, tips, and DAPs, and most importantly, a combination thereof. So that's it, guys. I hope this was useful. I do recommend this strongly. It's a wonderful IM, and a big shout out to Eminent Ears for coming up with this very well finished, very polished product. Very polished in terms of his looks, in terms of his sound, in terms of his packaging. A complete sense of luxury. Okay, so that's it for me, Sajid. I'm signing out, and stay tuned for my next one. Bye-bye.